Well, hello and welcome everybody to the New Health Conversation. I'm so happy to be joined today by probably the world's greatest nutritional weight loss and physiologist in the world, Dr. Paul Arciero. Today, what we're going to discuss is their breakthrough after 38 years of research looking at thousands of people on all the diets across the board. We're going to really get into it and explain to you why traditional diets based on 7 new peer-reviewed studies that Dr. Arciero and his team have published in some of the biggest medical journals in the world are going to change everything we ever thought about diet, exercise, nutrition, counting calories. So Dr. Arciero, welcome very much to the New Health Conversation podcast. We're so excited to have you today.
Peter, thanks for having me. Let's dive in.
All right, so let me just give people just kind of a quick overview, and then to save time, I'll have you validate what I'm saying. But here's my understanding. So for 38 years, looking at diets and people, you've certainly found, and you even told me you can lose weight on the Dunkin' Donut diet. But what you discovered in almost every case, every time, people lost anywhere from 25 to 40% of their lean muscle mass. That caused them to slow down their metabolism. They ended up gaining back all or more of the weight back. And you basically had let's call it a theory, you and your team, wait a minute, all diets out there are some form of lowering the quantity of the food, ignoring the nutrition. Well, the problem with that is the body only runs on nutrition. And when you have let's call it a floor level of nutrition we need, so all the organs, the brain, kidney, liver, all work. What happens on a diet when you lower that, when you go below that floor, you now have less food, but you also have less nutrition. So correct me if I'm wrong, but your theory was, is it possible to lower the quantity of food down to what we do on any of the diets we'd study, but not lower nutrition? Now you did that by you finding researchers who'd spent years traveling the world, finding foods that had massive amounts of nutrition, not massive amounts of calories. And that was the basic premise. And then you created 2 new ways of consuming the food, one called protein pacing, which, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, where you basically put together the world's most perfect meal in conjunction with regular food. Regular food was about 40% of what the participants had, 60% was from these world's most perfect food. And then you had them do protein pacing, which was the world's most perfect meal for breakfast, a regular lunch from the grocery store, a regular dinner from the grocery store, and then a 4th meal after dinner, the world's most perfect food. And you could do that because it wasn't about quantity, it was about quality. And then 2 days a week, you had people do something called intermittent nutritional fasting, not intermittent fasting, not fasting, where on those days, no food from the grocery store and just the world's most perfect meals, like 4 times a day, spread out every 2 to 3 hours, etc. Is that a good representation of what you did? And then I'd like you to explain to the audience, because a lot of people are confused about this. They keep challenging me, oh, you're a snake oil salesman, you don't know what you're talking about. The only way to lose weight is calorie in, calorie out, even though it's been debunked even by Harvard Medical School. I have the quote right here saying, stop counting calories. The idea of a calorie in, calorie out when it comes to weight loss is not just antiquated, it's just wrong. That's Harvard Medical School. So can you fill everybody in and why it's so critically important in the world we're living in today with 80% of America overweight, 50% obese, 50% pre-diabetic, and something I don't think you even knew. I got a new study here from Johns Hopkins saying study predicts obesity apocalypse by 2030 in 5.5 years. The current trend continues. 86% of Americans are going to be overweight or obese by 2030. I think we need a new approach, which you guys discovered. And I asked you, would you ever recommend a traditional diet ever again based on the science? So that was a lot, but I hope I did a good job of summarizing that.
Yeah, you did. You always do, Peter. Yeah, I mean, just a couple of comments. Yeah, the meeting of the minds here, just call it that, of those that had formulated these very nutrient-dense, perfect meal, as you describe it, and some of these other support systems, nutrition support systems, they actually found me. I had been conducting research in the field for 38 years, as you said, and was kind of taking a lead in this area. And so they thought, wow, this is an opportunity to connect with this scientist. And so, you know, we've kind of formed this relationship, and it has been nothing but a godsend ever since. I mean, we've really revolutionized. We are pioneering this groundbreaking research in this field of protein pacing, nutritional fasting to provide people optimal nourishment. So absolutely. Yeah. And I'm well aware of the Johns Hopkins studies. I mean, those things That's the world I've been living in for a long time. And I'm surprised the apocalypse is going to happen not until 2030 or 35. I was thinking I was going to be here much earlier. So that's a little bit more conservative, if you ask me. We've been on a downward spiral for 3 to 5 decades. And so I thought it was going to happen a lot quicker. I mean, it's happening in front of our eyes. But we need this solution. We need to get this out to the masses. We need to get this out to the world. The time is now. It's of essence. Our young children are suffering from adult onset diseases that they had never. When I went through my training in medical schools and graduate schools in the classes I took, there was no mention of type 2 diabetes in a young boy or girl, or heart disease in a young boy or girl, or some of these inflammatory conditions in a young boy or girl, or the levels of what we call morbid obesity in a young boy or girl. I mean, these were literally either very, very rare case studies, maybe one or two around the world, or in some cases not heard of at all. And now they're becoming what's called commonplace. They're becoming commonplace, meaning it's very usual now for young boys and girls to experience these diseases of lifestyle. It's really timely.
Well, back to the children, there was a study done about 5 years ago on obese children, and they said these 25% of them were suffering from rickets and scurvy, which is diseases of malnutrition. But
Yeah.
I think in essence, here's the thing, and I don't want to disparage anybody. I spend a lot of time on social media. I've not seen one person on social media ever show a one shred of medical evidence. Any of the studies that were done on diets were not done specifically by the diet companies. What I loved about what you guys did, you really started from scratch with a theory. You didn't know if it was going to work, but it did. So when we're talking about the world's perfect food, because I know listeners are going to ask, what are we most deficient in our food today? Number one, our minerals. They're called ultra trace minerals. You need those, but we get very few in organic. You found a source that had tremendous amounts of minerals. You also found a source that was very high in amino acids. You found an electrolyte with no sugar, no artificial sweeteners. Wonderful. But then you also sourced adaptogens. For the audience, in case you don't know, they come from Mongolia and Manchuria and China. They massively lower stress and inflammation in the body. But the big breakthrough was natural sourced vitamins. So before I let you answer that, I just want to clarify for the audience, okay? Every single provider out there, all they're telling you is the way to lose weight is to lower calories. I think we need to blow that to smithereens here in a second. But the point is they keep just repeating this. I see one now that's promoting intermittent fasting, and their solution is, depending on how much you pay, you can get 300 recipes, 600 recipes, or 1,000 recipes. They don't make one mention of nutritional density to create the world's most perfect meal. So can you comment on that and also clarify for people why peer-reviewed human trial studies, there's nothing higher in medical research, and there's a reason that none of these other diets will subject themselves to peer-reviewed human trial studies? Not mice or rats, humans.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can just start there with that one. So, peer-reviewed means that the experts, those that have been in the field for a length of time that has established them among the scientific experts and leaders in their field, read these papers. They're sought out. They're commissioned by the journal itself to review the paper. So that's the third-party independent review, peer-reviewed process. You need to have people that are independent from the scientists that conducted the study to critically analyze the research to determine whether or not it's even worthy of being published. But before that, Peter, I might add, in the top-tiered peer-reviewed journals, the editorial board, who actually are responsible for overseeing the entire publication of the studies in the journal itself, they make the first pass judgment. They're the ones that are really the lead. And in some of the cases, in fact, in one of the papers that I've recently published, there's what's called a 93% rejection rate at the editorial level, meaning that 93% of the papers are rejected right off the bat from the editors. So it's really rigorous. It's really intense in its critiquing because they want the best of the best. They don't settle for good enough. It's got to be the best. So that's the peer-reviewed process. And you're right. Everybody that's listening to this should pay attention to the peer-reviewed process of the published studies that you're using to dictate where you go. So let me jump back now. So that's the peer review process. That's the starting point. It's the only thing that you should use to help educate you and actually inform you of the decisions that you should make in your life, the peer review process. So you talked about the energy balance equation, and that's the energy in, energy out, or what they call CICO, calories in, calories out, EIEO or CICO. And it really comes down to just simply monitoring the amount of calories you consume. It's pretty easy to do. There's lots of apps to be able to do that, with the amount of energy you expend. And that's easy to do. You just get a watch. Any tracking system will tell you that. And as long as you live in that world, you're going to be healthy. And that's just wrong information. That is a gross oversimplification and miscalculation of what really is required for our health. And unfortunately, that's the method that we've been using for now decades. I mean, half a century.
Including
actually.
you in your research and the diets you looked at. That was the formula. Am I right? Until this.
Yeah, that was some of the formula. But I changed course, obviously, back early on in my career. So I started on this path back in the 1990s to determine a better way. I wasn't convinced that the energy in, energy out was the method that I had learned in graduate school. And again, that was 38 years ago. So it takes a length of time. But 38 years ago, I was able to change course and show that that is not the most effective manner and way to impact a person's health. So yeah, for everybody out there who's listening to this, and I hope it's in the hundreds of thousands and hopefully millions of people that are watching this video. And if you would be so, kind to share it with those other people. It's not about counting calories. It's not about measuring what you've eaten and what you've expended in order to give you health. That's very distant second to the quality of the nourishment you're providing yourself. The ultra trace minerals, the vitamins, the adaptogens, the antioxidants, we call those phytochemicals or phytonutrients, phyto because they generally come from plants, as well as the highest quality, highest source amino acids that we can obtain through protein sources. And why I emphasize this, Peter, is because our protein intake as a society, as a culture, as a world has been on the decline. I'll say it again. Our protein intake has been on a decline. If you ask most people from out on the street, they would say, oh, we eat too much protein. If you would ask any misinformed healthcare provider, they would say, oh, we eat too much protein. Nothing is further from the truth, the scientific truth. We have been on a trajectory of down spiraling in our, not just our overall intake of protein, but the quality of protein that we are consuming. And so there is absolutely no question that we need to increase not only the amount of protein we're taking in, but more importantly, the quantity of protein we're taking in. Now, here's one other thing. You talked about my protein pacing that I developed over the last 3 decades. That is now being incorporated into every leading publication, media outlet. They're all adopting my protein pacing, which is wonderful. In fact, there was just an article that I was reading in the airport yesterday from a major nutrition company that was saying it's most important that you pace your protein over the day every 3 to 4 hours with high quality protein to optimize your health. And I just was reading it and I thought, wow, that's wonderful. I mean, it would be nice if they gave credit where credit is due, but at least we're now starting to get the message out. But here's the difference. We're providing the optimal protein with the optimal proportion.
Well, that's what
the
you got. That's what
acids.
you found. That's how you created part of the World's Most Perfect Meal. And can I clarify for a moment? People get all hung up on protein. As far as I know, protein is like a walnut shell. It houses the amino acids, which is really why you ingest the protein. And it's not necessarily how much, that's where the quality comes in. It's how much of the amino acids are actually being absorbed and used in the body. That's where the high quality comes in. Another thing, you taught us to teach people exactly what you did in your medical trials. That's what we do. So everybody has to know this isn't just a pig in a poke where, oh, here are the ingredients and then you're on your own. No, there's a protein pacing and intermittent nutritional fasting are very specific protocols. But I would say this sort of even in closing, would you ever, based on just the scientific breakthroughs, well, first, before that, did it shock you to see people lose as much weight in a month as a year on any diet without the loss of water? And instead of losing lean muscle, they gained 6 to 9% lean muscle mass because of this protein source. Okay, let's be honest. But then also blood pressure, blood sugar, cholesterol, triglycerides all came down in a month. And I believe you told me never seen before, inflammation came down 25%. No diet, regimen, nutrition you've ever analyzed in 38 years ever produced anything like this. Is it not true you had to rerun the numbers like 2 or 3 times? You were so shocked when you saw results you had never seen in 38 years. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, yes, it's actually maybe even an understatement. It was startling. I had never seen this before in all of my scientific research or any other previous study that had been published up to that point. The degree, the magnitude, and the breadth of improvement that occurred. And Peter, one thing that we need to highlight, this was all accomplished without them exercising. There was no exercise involved in these studies. These preliminary studies, I wanted to rule out any other lifestyle factor that could contribute. We call it a confounding variable. It was confounding the results. I wanted to control for all of the other confounding variables. I only wanted to have the difference being what they were providing themselves in terms of their nourishment. So these results have been groundbreaking. They have been completely turning what we had known upside down on its head, literally, to show that, no, there is a solution. We just need to get it into the eyes, ears, and minds of the public to help them change their course.
Well, in closing, I think then again, I just want you to re-emphasize I want them to hear it from you, that all these other diets, most of which you analyze, which were based on this energy, calories in, calories out, whatever.
Yeah.
How in the world could you, in all ethically, recommend to any of your patients a traditional diet again based on this science? I mean, I think that's a good way to close out this segment.
Well, I would never, in any of my conscience, recommend any of those other diets. You know, we compared it to the best of the best. So just to put that out there for everybody, you know, we don't aim low in terms of our comparator. We don't use the SAD diet. That's the standard American diet. We choose really high quality, heart healthy Mediterranean type diets when we compare our study. And with our study coming out exceedingly significantly better than those other world leading. And those are very good, by the way. And so, you know, not that I wouldn't recommend them because they're not good. The heart healthy Mediterranean are excellent, but it's good enough. Those are good enough diets for most people. I want the best. And you know, I'm at the point now where I've labored all of these decades with my research. We've created this optimal source of nourishment with this perfect meal. The best is now where we want to be. And so that's what we're shooting for. And that's what we want people to, and it's quite easy to accomplish. It's not complicated. It's not difficult. It's not hard. It's just a matter of having the right information so that you can incorporate it into your lifestyle.
Well, I'll close with this big study, why you shouldn't count calories. Truth is, calorie counting is a terrible approach for weight loss. While counting calories and restricting calories can help you lose weight in the short term, the approach has never been proven to keep weight off long term. What's even worse, they said, is 2/3 of people try to counter restrict their calories will gain back more weight than they lost. Is that a good way to close out? Are you in a violent agreement with that statement?
Violent agreement. There could not be a better way to close it out. And you're exactly right. There's never been a successful long-term calorie counting diet. And even for people that might be having had some recent short-term experience, most people yo-yo and recycle back and gain more weight than where they started. And for all of you that are listening.
Very important. You've now had almost 2 or 3 years out from when the original, I want to make sure they understand. People have been able to maintain the weight they lost for the first time ever on any diet you guys ever analyzed. Is that true?
100%. Yes, it's been game changing. Yes, there's people that have been living now following this nourishment protocol, optimal nourishment protocol for almost a decade.
I love it. Well, Dr. Arciero, thank you for insight. I'm sure we're going to impact, I hope, millions of people. And listen, everyone, stop counting calories, not because Peter Greenlaw says or Dr. Arciero, but Harvard Medical School saying stop counting calories. The idea of calories in, calories is not just antiquated, it's just wrong. Thank you again, Dr. Arciero.
Thanks for having me.